The story you are about to hear has never been told before. It involves one of this country's staunchest enemies and an insidious plot to turn young Americans into international assassins. Unbelievably, the plot worked. Tonight, for the first time, you will hear the extraordinary account of a man born and raised right here in America, wanted now around the world as a hitman for Iran.
Making contact with this man was the stuff of intrigue. Tom Jarrell spent weeks in the Middle East attempting to enter Iran. In the end, the man once called David Belfield had to sneak out of Tehran for the interview. Now, meet a fellow American and admitted world terrorist.
It was a political assassination in the heart of the nation's capital. The murder made headlines worldwide because it involved Iran, a country in turmoil that under the leadership of the radical Ayatollah Khomeini was holding Americans hostage. In Washington, former Iranian embassy official Ali Tabatabai was the leading opponent of Khomeini. He was feared because of his powerful political contacts in the U.S. government and social contacts with the elite of Hollywood. He was frequently on television advocating Washington's point of view. The Ayatollah should be overthrown. That ended in 1980 when Tabatabai was gunned down in cold blood at the front door of his home. The assassin has eluded capture for more than 15 years and never spoken about the notorious case until we found him and asked him about the murder.
When I left him, he was still standing up.
What did you think? Had you missed?
Oh, I knew I'd hit him. But God has created something called shock. He was in it. He didn't feel anything.
As you left, how did you feel?
In situations like that, you suppress feelings and get on with your work.
Police department has charged Belford with first-degree murder.
The police knew David Belfield, who had taken the Islamic name Daoud Salahuddin, was the killer, but they never got their man. The assassin vanished into the mysterious and complex world of the Middle East, working with the radical government that was still holding American embassy officials hostage. These are videos Salahuddin shot as he traveled extensively to hotspots throughout the region, associating and plotting with other terrorists. Authorities now believe that other young black American men were recruited by Iran from colleges or prisons, and they all went through the same transformation. They adopted the Islamic faith, and then through religious radicals were persuaded that if necessary, it was a duty to kill for their spiritual leader, the Imam. We reached Salahuddin with assistance from the National Security News Service and help from a retired Washington, D.C. detective, Carl Schaffler, who has worked the case from the beginning.
What would appeal to a black man to become engaged in this?
They were Americans for the most part, black Americans who, I believe, felt alienated from our political and social apparatus in this country.
I was certainly looking for an alternative to white America as the rules and regulations for running my life.
Salahuddin was born in North Carolina, but grew up in Bayshore, Long Island, a town where neighborhoods were divided along racial lines. In high school in New York, he was a good student and an outstanding athlete. His parents were both university graduates, but because he was black, Salahuddin believes his father could find only menial jobs.
At Pilgrim State Hospital, he was in charge of the laundry section. He was a security guard, and he was also bartender and bouncer in a local nightclub.
Salahuddin left home in 1969 to attend Howard University in Washington. The school had an active Islamic movement on campus, attracting some students like David Belfield. He, like most, was embittered by racism and the Vietnam War. He abandoned his Southern Baptist beliefs, adopted Islam as his faith, and soon was leading student protests. When an Islamic group took over the Statue of Liberty to protest American policies, Salahuddin was one of the leaders. Soon, his acts turned violent.
I know of one case of arson I was involved in, and that was against an Iranian opposition newspaper.
Was that firebombing?
Well, yeah, it created a lot of damage.
And it led up to his first killing, the political assassination of Tabatabai. He has never described his life on the run until this exclusive interview with 2020. The trail to the interview was long. Our plan to meet in Moscow was stopped when the FBI began moving in on one of their most wanted criminals. Our papers to rendezvous in Iran were pulled by Iranian authorities at the last moment with no explanation. He clearly has enemies in both Washington and Tehran. So using prearranged codes, we agreed to meet here in the Mediterranean port city of Istanbul, Turkey. The location was his choice, a country adjacent to Iran, where he could easily come and go across the border using a phony passport.
How was it decided that he should be killed?
I think the idea was just to give a message to other putschists or would-be putschists as to what might happen to them.
Salahuddin faced tight security around Tabatabayi's house, so he decided to pose as a letter carrier. He paid a postal worker $500 to borrow his Jeep, and he obtained a uniform. The assassin had laid the groundwork for his killing through a deception.
The mailman is perhaps the most unthreatening guy in the community, and the one who can always get in somebody's house or through their door. Packages and everything were prepared. It was just a question of the postman ringing. And he did.
With an American man at the door, those inside fearing Iranian opponents let their guard down.
Who answered and what was said?
A boy who appeared about 15 or 16 years old answered. I told him, special delivery package for Mr. Tabatabai. He has to sign for it. And I heard his voice in the background, and he did come out to sign. And then for the first time in my life, and for the first and last time in his life, we saw each other.
Where were you holding the gun and where were you holding the package?
The package was facing him. The second package was beneath that package. I have them in my hand.
With one hand?
With one hand. In this bottom package, there's a pistol, and it's held flat, and 3 times point-blank range.
You squeezed 3 shots.
3 shots.
Did you see them hit the target?
I saw his clothes jump and the dust jump out of his clothes.
And any words said?
No, nothing was said. Just our eyes locked, and he gave me the very strong impression of a man who was expecting to die.
He's a fugitive. He has been declared a fugitive by the FBI.
Salahuddin fled to Iran, the country which he says had provided the money and orders for the assassination. Salahuddin was only one of several such operatives, according to these police intelligence reports obtained by 2020. They show supporters of the Ayatollah had established a recruiting and training program within the U.S. for homegrown terrorists. Schaffler, who today advises federal agencies on terrorism, was part of a task force that used undercover cops, secret surveillance photographs, and paid informants to identify suspected members of a group named the Islamic Guerrillas in America, the IGA, comprised at first of about a dozen young men like Salahuddin, who carried out a broad range of crimes against U.S. interests.
What types of crimes did the membership find themselves associated with?
Murder, conspiracy to murder, bank robbery. They threatened the lives of 2 federal judges, 2 prosecutors.
Is that possible, Iran ordering crimes in the U.S.? Listen to Salahuddin's description of the death order on Tabatabai.
How was the decision made then to carry it out?
I assumed that the decision came from what was the Revolutionary Council in Iran, in Tehran. That's my assumption.
Who told you that this man needed to be killed, or was he one of several people who were on a list?
No, there was an Iranian friend of mine who told me about this order. He just said order from the Imam, and that Mr. Tabatabai had been chosen. I was presented with other names too. When they showed me the list, I said that if you really want to make an impression, you should think about a person like Henry Kissinger.
Kissinger?
As I explained, why shoot the small dog when you can shoot his master? It's been a concern, but
and authorities are convinced that while he's been on the run, Salahuddin has closely collaborated not only with his Iranian handlers on the Revolutionary Council, but plotted acts of terror with other young American men who have fled to Iran and other Islamic countries. men like William Alston. He's now serving life in prison for murdering a policeman. But before being captured, he lived with Salahuddin in Tehran for 3 years. Alston, now known as Jafar Saidi, was a Citadel graduate, an officer in Vietnam. He became disillusioned with the war and the future for black men in America before he converted. Why?
The decisions I made were affected, and my life was affected very strongly because of the fact that I'm black, okay? Blacks have that experience. Hassan Daoud went through that same process. Iran comes along, anyone comes along and say, hey, there's an opportunity. You can be involved in something that's bigger than that gives you a chance to earn some respect for yourself, okay? To make your mark. That's very appealing to someone who has been denied power and influence. We were exploited to a certain degree, yes.
Another of Salahuddin's close pals was Clevin Holt, who under his Islamic name of Isa Abdullah fought against the Israelis in Lebanon and was seen extensively outside the Marine Corps compound in Beirut just before it was bombed in 1983. Schaffler recalls that Abdullah was once arrested while casing Air Force One, the presidential jet. Schaffler has tracked him now to Bosnia.
If I were an American soldier, I would be very concerned about his ability to penetrate our security for gathering information that could be used to do exactly what happened in Lebanon.
Do you think they're still out there?
There are clear signs that constant recruitment's going on, yes.
Schaffler says the Islamic guerrillas are operating through modern technology with messages sent over the internet. Times have changed, but not Salahuddin's convictions that he was right.
Looking back and with time behind you, have you considered you may have made a mistake, that perhaps this man did not deserve to die?
On that point, no, I've never wavered on that conviction about his deserving, okay? All governments kill traitors. So on that level, no, I never had any doubt about the man's death.
Have you had trouble sleeping with yourself in terms of, does this keep you up at night?
No.
The thought of this man standing there innocently signing for a package?
No, it doesn't keep
You taking his life? Would any devout Muslim have done what you did?
Not necessarily, no. It needs a certain temperament.
Temperament. Does that equate with the depth of faith? Does it equate with cold-bloodedness?
Probably some of both.
No Muslim kills innocent people.
Mohammed Tabatabai is the twin brother of the assassin's victim.
He is not Muslim. He is a heretic.
Former Detective Schaffler has now made telephone contact with the former David Belfield in Iran and is still hoping to work a deal to bring him in.
Has he gained your sympathy, your understanding? Would you still like to put the cuffs on him?
There are two sides to him. I view him in two sides. The one side is Dawood the person, and I have a lot of sympathy and a lot of respect for the ideals of what he was all about. But then there's the other side, and he killed a man in cold blood. And I took an oath as a law enforcement officer. I would do my job.
This is amazing. I did not know until I saw this piece that I knew Tabatabai.
Right.
We
He was
all
very socially
did.
active in Washington.
You know, first of all, I think we should point out that this is a very small fringe group. This is not representative of the Muslim movement or of their point of view.
Absolutely not.
Tom, why would Dawood want to talk to you?
He is a mysterious and complex man to figure out, Barbara. He doesn't really answer that very clearly, but his actions indicate he'd like to come home, back to the United States.
Make a deal?
He has written the Justice Department a long letter outlining what might be called terms for a plea bargain for him to come back and face justice. But he's never heard from them, and he doesn't really seem that unhappy living in Iran.
But now that he's done this interview, can he go back to Iran, or is he kind of a man without a country?
He is very much there. He's very much stuck there. Anytime he travels, it's illegal. It's on a phony passport. He can't really do much except stay in that part of the world, and in fact, he's never left it since.
But he's not in danger there.
Well, Iran is always dangerous, and certainly a man talking as freely as he did could raise some risk for him.
Yet he still has his same views. He has not repudiated them.
Absolutely. He was a soldier doing his job.
Oh, that's one of the most interesting, unusual pieces we have done. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Barbara.